Yeah, thank you very much. Reverend Jesse Jackson has been on the campaign trail for civil rights and political rights for the African American for quite a long time. Since the early 1960s, he was on the campaign trail together with the late Reverend Martin Luther King Jr. to struggle to make sure that the African American people were recognized, their rights were recognized equally like anybody else. It was not an easy struggle because, as you know, many of them were, the leaders of the civil rights movement were assassinated. But they stood firm, they fought until those rights were recognized. These people were segregated in terms of the services that were given to the American citizens. Schools, for example, education was segregated for blacks and whites, and all other amenities, even bus services were segregated. But in the late 1960s and 1970s, the American Supreme Court and the Constitution recognized these rights, and this was as a result of Reverend Jesse Jackson and others who fought. So for that reasons, we can say that Reverend Jesse Jackson had contributed to the recognition of civil rights and other rights of African Americans in the diaspora and elsewhere in the world.
Now, what would you highlight as his main contribution to the broader global civil rights movement?
Surely his main contribution is that he did not only speak for the African American people within the United States, but he also spoke for all the other struggling people of the world, especially for the Africans who were colonized by the European powers, who were struggling to get their independence. We all know that, for example, here at home, we were occupied by South African minority regime, and South Africa itself was governed by the apartheid regime, the same apartheid regime, who segregated, who discriminated, who introduced racial discrimination against the black people. So Reverend Jesse Jackson also played a role in dismantling apartheid when he campaigned against it, when he spoke against apartheid at many different forums in the United States and in the world. So which led to the fall of colonialism at large and apartheid in particular in Southern Africa. So he really played a major role for all the people who were struggling to get their independence and freedom and equal rights in the world. So Reverend Jesse Jackson was not just a fighter for civil rights in America, but for the broader world as well.
Now, Jesse Jackson also came from the era of Martin Luther King and Malcolm X, both of whom were assassinated. How would you say he continued their work for equal justice for the black Americans?
Yes, he despite the assassination of his colleagues, Reverend Martin Luther King Jr. and Malcolm X, who were in a different strain of the struggle, Reverend Jesse Jackson did not give up. He picked up where they stopped and continued with the struggle without fail. So he continued mobilizing, organizing demonstration, protests, and petitions to the government and the United Nations to get freedom for the American people, the equal rights, the civil rights for the American people and the world at large. So he did not waver. He continued with the struggle until to his old age. We saw that even in the latest events that took place in America, where the police were brutalizing some of the African American people, he stood up to speak against these injustices. So he never wavered, he never rested until to his last day. So Reverend Jesse Jackson really continued where his comrades ended.
Yeah. Now, Jesse Jackson also visited Namibia on the 15th of February in 1990 and met with the founding president. How significant was his visit in defining diplomatic and moral moment in Namibia's final transition to independence and placing Namibia at the center of a global turning point against apartheid and racial injustice?
Yeah. So his visit in 1990, just shortly before we got our independence, was really a significant moment for the Namibian people, because this was a struggle that he also contributed to. Remember our people who were struggling for the independence of our country. Some of them were based in the United States. Let me take an example of our former president, late Dr. Hage Geingob, and late Dr. Theo Ben Gurion. They were based, and others. They were based in the USA, and for many moments they shared platforms and battlegrounds against apartheid with Reverend Jesse Jackson. So his coming to Namibia was to say thank you to the Namibian people for their unwavering commitment to the struggle for independence. And we drew, as a young nation, we drew wisdom from him, because he was a fountain of wisdom on the issues of the struggle and independence. So Namibians really honor the visit that he made to our country, because it shows that he stood with us during our difficult time when we struggled for our independence.
Yeah. Now, another African leader that Jesse Jackson met was South Africa's former president, Nelson Mandela, following his release from prison. Now, given the human rights suppression experienced in both countries at the time, how significant was that meeting?
It was very significant, because the struggle that South Africa had, which was apartheid, was more similar to what the African Americans had in the United States, where they were segregated and discriminated. So the coming of Reverend Jesse Jackson to South Africa at the time when Nelson Mandela was released was really a symbolic gesture to the African people, to the South African people, that finally apartheid was overcome, the apartheid was to be defeated, and that freedom and equal rights was looming was coming to South Africa, and Nelson Mandela was going to be the first African president or black president for South Africa, which has struggled against discrimination for such a long time. So it was really a very symbolic visit that Reverend Jesse Jackson made in terms of the freedom and equality that was to come to the South Africans.